Hello, and welcome to the first ever episode in this podcast series. The aim, making public speaking accessible to everyone. I created this podcast series in conjunction with my online course. I thought it would be a great opportunity to hear professionals confirm that the things that I talk about in my course work and that they are applicable in the real world. So, in this first episode, I invited someone with extensive experience in the corporate world. During our discussion, I would like you to be on the lookout for 3 points in particular. The first one, how to train from a young age. Next, how to be a great public speaker even if you are doing it in a language that is not your mother tongue. And the third one, how to be a great public speaker in a virtual setting. Finally, in the last part of this podcast, we will be asking a ChatGPT generated question. So I hope you stick around for that and that you enjoy this podcast. Hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of Publicly Speaking, the podcast trying to make public speaking easy listening. And my name is Tim, and this is brought to you by tailoredguidance.com. Today, we, of course, have our first ever guest, as it is the first ever episode. It's Delphine Mousseau. Hello, Delphine. How are you?
Very good. Nice to have me here, Tim.
It's amazing. Thanks for having accepted my invitation to come on this podcast. It's a privilege to have you. Just to give a little bit of background information on Delphine, we met as she was embracing a portfolio career with several board positions, including chairperson of the board. After we continued to get to know each other, I discovered her extensive experience in e-commerce. She started in this field in 1999. Before that, she was a consultant in strategy at the Boston Consulting Group. So today, really, we're hearing from someone with experience in the startup, in the scale-up, and in the corporate world. That will give us a rich view on how communication is used. So to start lighthearted and to start from the beginning, really, I'd just like to ask you, Delphine, what was your first experience of public speaking?
So it's quite interesting that I don't have really a key moment of public speaking. I realized in my youth, I was involved with a lot of voluntary work, NGOs, and I had the opportunity to have to stand up and push my project in those NGO contexts on my own, but without any really strict format. So whether it was, selling flowers in the street to gather money to be able to fund a project, it was a form of public speaking to go in the street. We were buying these yellow flowers in the spring to sell them in bunch to earn money. So we had to talk to people in the street. Or it was selling a little recipe book that we had done on mushrooms in the class, again, to fund a class trip. And then we had to go door to door to sell our little guide on mushrooms so we could collect money. All of those ways were public speaking, but it was not really orchestrated with any kind of adult helping me figure out how I could learn and do it better. So it was a lot of experimenting.
Right, excellent. So how old are you at this point?
I guess it started around 14 years old, like teenage times.
Okay, what got you involved in that project? Were you asked or did you volunteer?
Yeah, I think naturally I love, being in action. I love strategy and being in action. And it started really young. When I see something that I want to accomplish, if nobody's taking the lead, then naturally I tend to take the lead. So I think that was an element. Also, I was living in a city where there was no university. So there were no young adults who were taking those roles that usually are, leading those kind of organizations. So as a young teenager, because there was space and room for me to grow, I was taking these kind of roles.
Okay. So was it your idea to get involved with these NGOs, or were you picked out from a bunch of pupils in school, for example?
Yeah, it's always a mix, like you stand up and I think in my life, throughout my life, I've seen that it's always the same people who get involved. So, whether it's class mom, where it's taking the lead in the office, like there are people like me who are quite extrovert, who have a natural tendency to feel comfortable as a leader. In the calm, I'm very directive, so I can organize and it doesn't wear me out. I can actually enjoy it. So naturally, as a teenager, these qualities were showing up and it's a mix of needs and willingness to take on the role, and it worked out this way.
That's really good. So would you say that it is your personality that has led you to having to improve perhaps your public speaking skills? Or would you say that you had to just work onto it because you wanted to do certain things, and therefore to accomplish them, you had to improve yourself in these areas?
I think there is a path of self-learning. So you want to accomplish something, you want to get people to follow you and to be engaged, and then you have to develop the public speaking. And then there has been some clear steps in my life where I had some trainings, or I had some people in front of me who were amazing at what they were doing in terms of public speaking. And then I started realizing that there were some skills, like there were some methods, and I could really go to the next step by applying those methods. So there is a path of, you need to accomplish it. So the way you can, kind of do it yourself, you sort out your own methods. And then there is really a jump whenever you get other people to give you some hints, whether it's coming from their own practice or whether they're coming from tools like, people can have in structured learning of public speaking, like Toastmasters. And then when you get those tools, suddenly you elevate your public speaking, and it's kind of mind-blowing what you can get in terms of engaging with the audience, being memorable, getting your message through.
Okay, it all seems really interesting. The one thing I've noticed in what you've just said is you seem to be equating leading people with public speaking. Would you say that's correct?
I think it's there are different elements around public speaking. First, public speaking is not necessarily a huge audience. I think in the workplace, as you go up in the ladder in terms of hierarchy and responsibility, you have less and less time to convince. So you have to basically be able to use techniques on your communication in order to get your message through. I mean, for example, at Zalando, I had every week the opportunity to talk to the top manager of the company in order to steer the decision on the business. And usually there was these 30 seconds where we were waiting for the elevator, where I could actually push my topics. And if you don't have good trainings in terms of how to articulate your thoughts, it's difficult to take advantage of those 30 seconds, in front of the elevator. And when you master that and you're able to tell your story, to create some momentum, to engage with the person emotionally, all those elements that you can find in good trainings, then you can get your message through. And maybe you're going to unlock one thing or another, because suddenly, your project is getting crisp for your leader.
Okay, excellent. So it's great. We've gone straight into the heart and matter very quickly. So that's awesome. I just want to move through your education. So you've gone from a normal French school, I'm guessing, where you started to involve yourself with voluntary work. You would say that that's helped you to get some public speaking experience, I'm guessing. You talked about social interactions with people you had to sell things to. Did that help with your confidence, or did that help with your skills? What would you say?
So I think what is interesting is that in the French system, at least 40 years ago, it was very much of the classroom with desk next to each other and the teacher delivering the message. So there was very limited opportunities to actually speak up. I mean, you could answer a question, but that's it. I've seen a very big difference. My kids have been going to the British school and then to international school. I guess the French school also evolved, but there were way more opportunity to public speak. And especially they had this kind of assembly every Friday morning at the British school, where every kid had actually to present their topics, where another during the year. And that was really challenging your ability to create a story and to deliver that message to an audience. So it's not only the stage freak, like the managing your emotion being on stage, but also articulating your thoughts. So I think there is this first element is, what do you learn at school about public speaking? And unfortunately, in the French system, so far, it was very limited. So it was a lot of learning by doing. And of course, the more you experiment the ability to deliver your message, the more confident you are about it. So definitely my experiences outside school have been helping me. But I guess if I had experiences within the school, I mean, I was a class rep, so I had a few opportunities, but nothing compared to what my kids have been exposed to. So I think indeed the first years, If your kids are not exposed to public speaking in their educational program, it's very important to find other ways like theater or association, anything that give them a chance to be seen and to have to show themselves.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I've got quite a bit of experience of the British schooling system, and I have to say, although you're right, there are some opportunities to speak up, and I think it gives you exposure to the whole aspect of having to speak in front of your teachers or having to speak in front of your fellow students. It's not really structured. So, for example, you'll turn up and the teacher will say, "Okay, next class, I want you to do a presentation on who Isaac Newton was, or Pasteur was, or Shakespeare was, and you do have to stand up." But often what happens is that you'll have the pupil who will have done a PowerPoint or will have written a text, and they'll stand in front of the class, but they'll just read it. And to be fair with the students, is they have there's no training. There's no, okay, you can do this, you can do that, you can create eye contact, you can use gestures, you can try and use illustrations, you can try the way you should order your ideas. None of this is just do a presentation and then they'll give you 5 marks. Okay, you get 5 marks for 5 interesting facts. But there's no, even I remember I was being in school and being a teacher, I remember trying to encourage the pupil to speak up without reading their notes, and I'd give them a bonus point. I'd say, okay, you get bonus points if you're able to not read the PowerPoint slide, and because we can all see the PowerPoint slide, we can all see the text, we don't need you to read it, we can all read it. And the best of students, I shouldn't say the best students, but the most motivated students, in order to get the bonus point, would basically learn the whole text by heart so that they wouldn't look at the screen. So obviously I'd have to give them the point, but it would sort of defeat the purpose of public speaking, I think. Although being capable of reciting a text is a great skill to have, and I think memory can be useful within this setting. But I think it defeated the purpose of trying to help them to gain confidence in speaking in their own words. So I do get what you say about there being more opportunities within the schooling system, but I do believe that there's improvements to be made. Now, I wasn't an English teacher, and it'll be interesting for me to interview at some point an English teacher and see how they come about perhaps doing presentations in the classroom. But in science, I know it was very much liking anyway. So we're in your school days. Oh, please go on.
Yeah, what you're pointing out, like there is this reciting or learning by heart. And I have to say, when I do a format like a TED Talk, I've done it several times, especially through the conference I organized for Women Rising Pineapple. You tend to learn by heart, or at least be very on script, because you want to make sure at least your beginning and the end is nailed. So using a very precise vocabulary to have really an impact. So usually I learn the first minute and the last minute by heart, and the script is very, very close. So I think it's not a problem to learn by heart if you have something where you want to deliver something extremely crisp. If you want to talk about a topic and really genuinely interest your audience for a long period of time, like half an hour, because you want to, share knowledge or share a project that you want to get a budget for instance, then you need to have talking points and then really talk from your heart. And this is where it becomes very tricky for people who never had this experience.
Yeah, I would agree. It's interesting. I mean, if I ever finish my online course currently creating, please be on standby. Hopefully it'll be there soon. But this idea of preparing the introduction, well, we might come back to it at some point, but this idea of really knowing your introduction and really nailing your conclusion and knowing the first few words by heart really helps to settle your nerves and make sure that I got this first part right, and then you settle in. And then you can start using your own words. I find that is a good technique to use when you're public speaking, especially in front of a large audience where you don't want to get it wrong.
Totally.
So thanks for that. And so let's move on a little bit from school. Let's move on to university now. University has a lot of different ways in which you can end up having to do some public speaking. For example, having to speak in front of your professors, or having to speak in front of your fellow students, or having to present a project that you're working on, whatever may be the case. Did you find yourself in such situations at university, for example?
So actually, I did the business school in France, and the system in the business school is that you had actually public oral examination. So that was actually the point where I was the most exposed, but it was a dialogue between the teacher interrogating and me on a different topic. So
Yep.
it was more of, preparing in 20 minutes and presenting in 20 minutes what you had to say on the topic and answering a few questions. And then afterwards, I don't recall any presentation. So it's very sad to say, but apart from looking for sponsors and talking with a few companies to get money to organize event again, I recall very, very limited interaction. Yeah.
So is it fair to say that your experience up to this point, your experience of public speaking is actually more hands-on than theoretical then? Because you're not really presenting things, you're just being asked questions and interacting socially and selling things, but you're not really at this point standing in front of an audience and giving your talk, really.
Yeah, I mean, definitely until I joined the workforce, I had zero training on public speaking, and I had very limited on-stage experience apart from theater plays and indeed what we mentioned earlier.
Okay. It was good because most people will tend to end up having to do public speaking in an informal setting when it's not necessarily a talk in front of an audience, but as you said, it will be in smaller increments of public speaking in front of various types of people. So how it's end up being. So let's say somebody doesn't end up going to business school or going to university. How would you replace the experience if you found it valuable? Actually, if you found this experience valuable that you've managed to have during your time at business school, how would you tell someone to replace that?
I think definitely I would jump directly into training. If you think that you will have to engage, I mean, if you're a software developer, most likely you would have limited opportunities to make a difference through public speaking. But in most of the jobs, actually, it makes a difference. So I would really invest time. So either self-training, but I think it's good to do it at least in a group so you can have opportunity to practice. And otherwise, institution like Toastmasters, which exist in all cities in the world, in all languages, usually local plus English, is a great way to have an opportunity to learn techniques and to interact with others and test yourself. I've not done it personally, but I've known a lot of people who have been part of Toastmaster groups, and it's been really a life-transforming experience in terms of public speaking.
Okay. Now let's talk social interactions there for a minute. So if somebody, I think both you and I, and it's probably one of the reasons we're doing this podcast at this point, but I think both you and I are fairly extroverted. All right. It's if one is to categorize people, then perhaps we could say that both you and I are fairly comfortable speaking within a public setting, right? But if you were addressing yourself to somebody that was perhaps more shy, more introverted, and you wanted to give them an opportunity to help them to gain confidence in speaking up, whatever the social interaction is, what would you say to them, for example?
So there is several aspects. The first one is indeed all this fear and all what's going into your head, and we can go more deeply into those different elements from a pure brain functioning perspective. So it's really this, you're touching here the self-worth, and whether you're introvert or extrovert, you have some people who are very extrovert and they're very easy to be in a group. As soon as you give them the mic or you ask them to do a speech, suddenly they're uncomfortable. So, because they feel like they're going to be judged. So there are many aspects around this self-worth and how you can, tame a bit this fear. And then there is really your willingness to share. So I've seen some people who are very introvert, and when they're on the topic that they really love, then suddenly, the way they engage with the audience, you can see they try not to have eye contact or anything, but they can still be very engaging speakers because they really talk from their passion and what they really have discovered or what they want to share. So I would not be, I would not say if you're introverts, it's not going to work out. I think if you need to really first consider, are you comfortable with your self-worth, and what do you need to make sure you can calm down this fear that prevents you from taking the opportunities. And once you take the opportunity, enjoy the ride. by, having an experience, sharing what you really are deeply concerned about. If you speak on something that you're not interested in really, truly, it's not going to be a fun experience.
Okay. So start perhaps by speaking up about what you like within a social setting, perhaps. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I do agree with that. It's true that most of us will suddenly become more and more animated the more we enjoy the topic that we're talking about. And I think what helps as well is when you're talking about something you have experience of and that has had a positive effect or a negative effect, obviously that might change the tone of the conversation, but if you talk about something that's had a positive effect on your life, for example, and you're suddenly sharing it with somebody else, you naturally, whether you're introverted or extroverted, I think naturally you tend to be more expressive about how you speak about it. And as soon as you become more expressive, you invite people to listen to you through your body language and through your tone of voice. Right. So it's really good stuff. So I just wanted to know now, at this point, you've gone to university, you've had all this experience, which is a very practical experience, which I think personally, I think it's great to be able to then move on into the professional world. So now we're in your professional world. How did you get, what was your first job, and how was public speaking involved in that context?
Yeah. So my first job was a strategic consultant. So I was doing basically massive production of slides, which at that time were really slides in plastic. And that's quite funny. And actually, it was usually documents which were meant to be read.
You mean for pictures? Like to show them on screens?
They were projected with a...
right. Okay. I thought, okay, yeah, right. Okay.
Printing on plastic and then showing it with projector, because we didn't have PowerPoint with a digital projection. It was analog projection. And what was interesting at that time is that the documents that we were producing in consulting were documents that were meant to be read, but we were commenting. And this is a first thing that got me completely off track, I would say, because very often people produce documents which are meant to be read, and actually they're not meant to be presented. And that's the really big error that people are doing, is that if you have a document that meant to be read, and then you put it on the screen, well, what do you expect people to do? They're going to read it. So you need to leave time for people to read it and then comment. But to be honest, if you have done your job right of having a good document to be read, all the information will be written on it. So where is the comment? And
so can I just interfere there? So just so I understand this properly, you were giving some documents that people you gave it to were supposed to have read it. Is that right?
So they were basically, the document was supposed to be what they keep afterwards. And there was a disclaimer on the first page: this document cannot be read without having the comments attached to it. But to be honest, it was not true. You could really read the document and have the essence of the information. And our role as consultants was to present the document.
Okay. So you were basically, it was public speaking with a manuscript. Have I got this right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And I know there's nothing worse than that, because if you write your text and end up ad-libbing at this point, you'll go back to the text and it just fumbles your words, because it's written in a certain way and you're trying to say it in a different way. So so how did you find that then? How did you find that?
And we had people, if I take some little paper here, we had people who were playing, I don't have anything interesting here, who were doing like the striptease, like moving the slide, because they didn't want people to read the whole slide. So they were doing this striptease method to show the slide as we're going, which is also completely crap. So, it just denies the purpose if you have a presentation. So this is the big learning, but it took me years to unlearn this method, where actually you need to have on the slide only an illustration. So usually I've got an image or 3 bullet points or 1 word, and bullet points are most likely, most of the time, for me to be guided. It's like don't forget to talk about point A to A, B, and C, but it's not for the audience to connect. Oh, it's 1 quote, and then I would read it, aloud as the people are reading it. So I think that was the main thing in consulting. I had a lot of opportunities to speak. Most of the time it was a dialogue afterwards, because we were discussing the points, but the presentation itself was really the worst way possible to present, because indeed he was commenting a manuscript.
Okay. So, all right. So it evolved because, I would agree with you that having a manuscript and then trying to be personal with the audience is extremely difficult to do. It's possible, but you have to know the text so well that you can lift your eyes up so regularly and almost read it by heart. And it doesn't really work. No, yeah.
It
Plus,
doesn't really work.
You weren't writing it, were you? It wasn't your own words.
No. It was my own words. But
Okay,
still,
your
audience is capturing is reading. So you ask basically two contradictory messages to your audience: listen to me and read. So they're going to choose whatever to do. And this is why very often people show me a document and say, what do you think? Is it a good document? And I always start by, is it meant to be read or is it meant to be commented?
Right.
Because if it's meant to be commented, you need to take half of the content and put in the speaker's note. If it's meant to be read, you might consider doing a Word document, because it's going to be even better. The Amazon.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So at this point, you decide to move from an entirely manuscripted, this is not a word, an entirely manuscript outline to an outline where you have speaker's notes and then you have presentation, or you only use your PowerPoint presentation as a speaker's note as well.
Yeah. So basically, there is about 20 years in between those first method and the method now.
All right. Thanks for making us all feel very good.
because I got training and I had very interesting speakers training who took slides. This man asked us to bring slides we had presented the week before, and then he said, okay, what is necessary? For instance, in most companies, you have the logo of the company and the name on the slides. I mean, it's disturbing the audience because there is an extra element of visual that you can take off. So, okay, you want to have it on the first slide, maybe, but then afterwards, less is more. Take out anything that is not useful. If you plan to make a big, things about giving an information, just put one number and then people see 20%. And then you say, hey, this quarter, we've been increasing our turnover by 20%. If you write turnover increased by 20%, then you have nothing to say, So it really changes, because then you're just like, oh, wow. And this number is ticking because now it's big on the screen and there is nothing else that needs 20%. So the memorability is going to be completely different.
Okay, so at this point, do you have speaker's notes, or do you literally just remember what 20% means?
I usually write my presentation when I prepare. I write everything in the speaker's notes on the tool I'm using. So whether it's PowerPoint or Google Docs or whatever. And then depending on how the presentation is, either it's so much my topic and I'm so immersed into it that I will present just the big numbers. If there is a bit of a twist in the way I want to present, or if it's something where I've got a lot of examples and I'm worried I'm not going to think about it, I will have a few cards. So usually I write my speaker's notes in the software that I'm using in big characters. I print them and put them, I cut the page in 4. So I've got 1/4 of an A4 and it fits in the palm of my hand. And then I put here, not the full text written, but with the key speaking points.
So like a cheat sheet.
Yeah, like a cheat sheet. And if there is something that I want to articulate very precisely because it's a sensitive topic, or I want to make sure that there is a catchy sentence, then I'll write the sentence completely.
Okay. I don't know why it reminded me, but the word cheat sheet reminded me of something important, is that neither of us have English as a mother tongue. And these kinds of words are very dangerous. So can I just make a side note here? And when did you start speaking English? And when did you start having to do presentation? Because obviously all of your scholarity was in French. Yeah. And then I'm guessing you started in a French company. When did English become prominent in your business?
Yeah, so actually I've been learning English and practicing English when I started working at BCG. Even though it was the French office of BCG, it was a global company. So we had a lot of our assignments, we were in English. So I would say maybe 20% of my work was with English. It was not great at that time because we were a lot of French speakers trying to speak English together. So the level of English was not great. And then I moved to the Netherlands and then I started working in English. I have to say my English improved drastically when I started working with native English speakers. So when I had an American boss versus a Dutch boss, the language elevated. And same at Zalando, you know, having native English speakers around has been changing the game. My kids are native English speakers, so they've been correcting me quite a lot and would still make fun of my terrible accent. So I've got a few words like paw, which I cannot say. So I do paw, 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 and they look at me like if I'm using a gun because I'm not able to say the paw of a bear. This is still this schwa sound.
Oh, okay. Yes, I just got that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you just
pause.
got
Okay. Yeah, you got it. I think you got it. Yeah.
I don't know. It's a schwa
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So,
I think as we understand each other, it's good.
yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I would say that the English speaking word in general is much kinder to the foreign accent anyway. I think, I don't know what you think, but having worked in France or having spent a lot of time with French people, my wife is English, and it's funny because she makes this comment that every time she speaks French to a French speaker, to a French person, they will always point out there's a little bit of an accent, you know. They'll always point that out. And I mean, it's nothing major, but obviously I think that in England people will try and point it out, maybe because they want to know where you're from, or but it's usually they're fairly discreet about it, and they're very kind about, as long as they've understood the point that you're trying to make, they're not too bothered about how you've pronounced it. So I think, disclaimer, it's not too important. I don't think the accent is massively important. However, for ourselves, I made the point that sometimes you talked about poor, I talk about cheat sheets. I don't know why I keep doing this. I am going to say it wrong at some point, but this, how do you overcome? So when you're doing a presentation, to try and, because I'm guessing when you do it in English, the level of stress increases. Am I wrong? Or at this point, it doesn't matter anymore?
By now, it's okay. I think the most important is to write directly in English. I actually prepared recently a presentation in French, and then I turned it into English because I had a different audience and I had an assignment to do it in English. And it was very difficult because even the structure and the way of thinking was in long sentences. And I think in English, so if ever English is not your native language, it's very important to write directly in English. So you have like this sharp structure of sentences, so it fits well the English speaking audience.
Okay, all right. So you would avoid words, for example, that you struggle to pronounce?
No, doesn't matter.
Not necessarily. No. You just take your time, make fun about it.
Yeah, it's yeah. Keep it easy. Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah, so the way I would say it, because I've had the privilege of doing public speaking in various languages, including some very difficult ones like Thai, for example. And I find that, funnily enough, I find that working from English is a little bit easier. So I'll have my outline in English. And the reason I do this is because I find English extremely efficient as a language. It tends to not need too many words to go straight to the point. It's a very illustrated language. I don't know if that makes sense, but most of the words that you use tend to go straight to the point, straight to the heart, straight to the head, and people tend to get it easier. So what I do is, instead, because I used to have outlines in French and then I would speak in Thai, and I realized that it would mess me up quite a bit because the sentence structure is so much more complicated, for example, in French. And so if you work from a language, from the base language that you're working from, to translate whatever language you're going to speak into, is something that is a lot more easily structured and simplified. And I find it's easier to then translate it in your head. And when I create the outline, I would write little words that are a bit more complicated to explain. And I really want to use that specific word, and because it needs to be, the word needs to be precise. So I want to use that one. So I'll write that one, but the rest of the outline will be in English, and then I'll speak in the whatever other language I need to speak in. Yeah. So it's interesting that you don't shy away from using whatever word, but you do simplify your outline to a certain extent, or you just keep it and just see what happens.
I just write everything in the language I'm going to give the presentation in. And since I've been away from France for 20 years, I can sometimes struggle with the vocabulary in French, in some areas. So I think what is important to make you feel comfortable, or might help you feel comfortable, is to have the lexicon of the topics you're going to talk about. So you have really the precise vocabulary. So I actually had also to do a presentation in e-commerce about e-commerce in German, and having the 30 words which I might be using available at hand because I might not remember them at the moment when I'm speaking, that might make you feel more comfortable.
Okay. All right. So to make this podcast relevant, there's two things I want to mention before we wrap up. The first one is obviously the use of Zoom through the whole COVID period. So you obviously are in a context where it's a lot better to be in front of people. But did you have to face moments where you couldn't be in front of people and you had to replace it with some other method, virtual method?
Yeah. So actually, I had to do quite a lot of presentation, like pep talks to a big crowd, like 100 people in my room, like I'm here alone. And that was very, very tiring because most of the people either are close, not showing their camera, or then actually not watching, or they're looking not exactly in their camera. So you cannot catch the trigger. If the tone, the speed is right, that you can catch very easily in a physical audience. So what I've learned is if I have to do something really important, I would have someone in the room. So I did one of the Rising Pineapples conference exercise where we're doing actually vision boarding as a group. And I had two people in the room, and it makes world of a difference because, of course, you cannot adjust to the whole crowd. But having already two people giving you, live feedback is very, very helpful. So if you do something which is critical for your career or critical because you think it's very important for the people who are receiving the message, I think having a mini audience is really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's really good. I never thought about that. What I used to do is just pick somebody who I could see was listening. So I'd pick one of the screens and I'd enlarge it and I'd just speak to them because I could see they were listening to. But it's true, when you have loads of dark screens, people not putting their camera, they're free to do whatever they want, but it's a lot more difficult for the public speaker, for the person doing the talk presentation, to be able to play off the reactions. I think that's what you meant, isn't it?
Exactly.
To play off the reactions, to look at them in the eyes, to be able to play off of that. So, okay, so the way so who would you imprison to listen to you, to force you to listen to you in a live session?
Yeah, whoever is interested by my talk. I think maybe the second advice would be mind the background. Some people have backgrounds which are very cluttered. When you're behind a gallery and we can sort of see the titles, we're a bit willing to see what you're reading, so it can capture attention. And some people are using fake backgrounds. I remember one which was, so interesting. I was at the time dating my apartment. I was looking at that lamp and saying, that's an interesting lamp. Like the background was so interesting that, the person was disappearing. I think you should also mind your colors. It's nice that you have a yellow, very striking shirt today, but if you have a color that is not matching well your background. I remember a woman who was quite pale wearing a beige top, and she was in this kind of fake beige office, and she was like completely disappearing. So it's hard to concentrate on someone who is in visibly a kind of a ghost. So you need to be very careful with those elements, because in the end, since it's a very small we see you in very small, you need to really be very visible. So having the right contrast and right background, I think, is very important.
Yeah, this is not my usual office. I thought about half an hour, like putting
that's very good. That's very good.
Plant. Yeah, I'm trying to do something about it. It's still not there, but I don't know. I'm going to work on it. And I thought I put this shirt to put some color into it so that I would stand out a little bit.
I think it's interesting right now because there is enough that it's not plain. It doesn't look like a booth, and at the same time, it's not distracting. So I think it's actually a very
that was the idea. Oh, thanks. Oh, nice about that. Yeah, thank you. I'm chuffed. But yeah, I agree with you with the virtual background. I am a very anti virtual background. Now, I understand that some people have to do their presentations in a setting where, I don't know, they might be in a car, they might, but to the extent possible, like try and find a nice setup in your own house, even if it's nature, even if you're outside. I just think because it's just the virtual background to me is extremely, it doesn't help me to focus because all I can see is the outline of the head of the person sort of half blending with the with the virtual background every second, and I'm just looking at the ears disappearing and reappearing, and the headphones, and so yeah. And the only thing I would say, and I think that I encourage people to do, is avoid things that hide your face. I mean, right now, perfect setup, you know, we can see your face. You don't have these massive headphones on that make you look like an airline pilot, or the microphone in front of your mouth that hides half of the expressions of your face, really. So yeah, I think Zoom has been quite an experience. And
Yeah.
I can see as well that you've made an effort that we can see your hands. I think it's really important that people just don't just, you know, see half the face. And as a teacher, I've had a lot of students who have their cameras all sorts of various ways with angles that are crazy, and it is distracting. It is very distracting. So if you can make it a professional setting, it definitely helps.
I really like also the possibility to put yourself into the presentation. So I've done that with, if you are doing like a delivery of a message, you know, where you're really alone speaking, so it's not a dialogue.
Yeah.
So I've been trying out with the green background and with me being, you know,
Okay.
out.
Yeah.
And then I've constructed my PowerPoint presentation to actually have a lot of space so I could stand that visually. And then I could comment, even like showing things.
Yeah.
And then people have only one screen, because otherwise people on Zoom or Teams, they would have one screen with a presentation and you very small next to it. They cannot look
Yeah.
at both. So they will have to
No.
make a choice. So if you could put
Yeah.
them in, you've got also some solution with Loom or others where you've got just only a small dot where you're in. I think it really helps. So you have to find
Okay.
out what is important for you. But if you need a lot of attention from people and at the same time need to present some elements because visually it's necessary, try to put them together. I think it's very helpful.
Yeah. I think, yeah, so there's loads of tools now. It's extraordinary what they've created in the last 2 years. I think probably driven by COVID and the need to try and do things from home. I mean, I quite like Prezi. It's a nice, subtle way of making slides appear and disappear. I'm not sponsored, by the way, but if they're listening. But yeah, I quite like these types of softwares where it's seamless. It easily appears and disappears if you must have something that's presented, rather than, yeah, I'm not a big fan of you disappearing in the corner, the presenter disappearing in the corner, because I find, yeah, it's best if you present it. Because I used to use Adobe Connect, and you could sort of change the window sizes, and most of the time the setup was the presenter was small in the corner. But what I find, it's rarely the presentation that attracts people's attention. It's actually the person speaking that attracts people's attention. So if the person speaking is right at the end of the corner in a small, people will start looking elsewhere, because there's nothing appeal unless you have a beautiful picture or an illustration that you want to underline. I think it's rarely what you're looking at that is actually capturing your attention. It's more the speaker with his gestures and his facial expression. So yeah, things to play around, but I agree with you. In order to stay professional, keep it trim, keep it nice and clean, and yeah, I would avoid virtual background personally. So we've done Zoom, but can we talk a little bit? So this, I don't know, I've tried to incorporate AI into our discussion. So I had a bit of a discussion with ChatGPT before we had this podcast, and I thought, what am I gonna do? So I started discussing with ChatGPT. I wanted it to come up with a decent question for me to ask you. Okay. And at the first few questions he came up with was like fairly rubbish. So I've had to had like a 5-minute conversation with it where I had some back and forth. The best I got. Do you mind if I ask you the question? Because this is the best. No, okay. So this is the best I got. But then again, maybe I'm not very good yet at asking the right questions. But this is what I got. Where was it? Hold on. I need to go back to my ChatGPT account. Here we go. So it says, if you were to compare your e-commerce journey to a famous movie or a well-known story, which one would it be, and what public speaking tips or lessons can we draw from that comparison? Putting you on the spot there.
So maybe my e-commerce journey would be ups and downs and ups and downs. So it would be a kind of a Lord of the Ring with some top of the hills and down and top of the hills, and down.
Okay.
And I think maybe the most important tips that that I've been using actually mostly at Zalando is really creating very strong images so you can make your text memorable. So for instance, I wanted to show how important it is to have stock, to be able to sell goods. I mean, that's obvious when you're in a retail business, whether it's e-retail or physical retail. But at Zalando, there was always an anxiety. If we have too much stock, then we were going to have too much end of stock. We'll have to discount too much. So there were some phases where people were resistant to have stock. And also sometimes in season, obtaining more stock was a lot of effort. So past of this resistance, there were some moments where it was difficult. So I actually showed the image of a hamster, because the hamster is known for taking no, it was a squirrel, so not a hamster, a squirrel, taking reserve, for the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And actually the squirrel was really, really thin, like a squirrel on a big diet, and
Okay.
these little images of the little squirrel, like, it's just like, this is what we are today. We want to be a real squirrel, getting your nuts, and these kind of things that people stick with people. When you orchestrate your message around a very strong image, it sticks. And then, people a few weeks later are still like, I'm working on a squirrel, I'm getting the nuts, So I think there is the big learning for me is, how do you illustrate and give some elements for people they can hook to, so they can remember your message. Because whether it's a positive message of success or it's a difficult message, because this one is a difficult message, I want really people to engage and basically cross-functionally serve the department. You want them to think about it every day. So if you give them a complex message with 10 bullet points, you're sure that 5 minutes later it's forgotten.
Sure, I get that. Yeah. So stock is the one ring to rule them all. Should I carry on the Lord of the Rings? Okay, I tried. Sorry about that. So I agree with you. I think illustrations and word.
Yeah, giving you other tips on that, because it crossed my mind.
Go on, please.
I also, when I left Zalando, I did a speech with 6 big ideas. And it's known that if you're not taking notes, 90% of what you have learned, you have forgotten within a week. Maybe 50% in one day and 90%. There is a study around this. So what I gave at the end is little papers with one of the 6 points, and the people could pick the one that was resonating with them. And this idea of having something physical to remember is also very, very helpful. So if you have something that needs to be very sticky, if you manage to get people either to write it down, put in their purse, or to, you get a little goodie that they will put on their keyring or whatever, that sticks with the message. This is extremely powerful. You really get the experience, get physical with people, and that makes it very memorable. So it's all about this stickiness and memorability that I think I've been learning along the way. I think, from delivering a message, convincing, and being memorable, if you reach that level, I think your communication is extremely efficient.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I agree with you. The conclusion is, most of the time, is what people end up going away with. And so if you manage, I find if you manage to find an illustration that you can set up throughout the entire talk that creates a line across the talk that people can remember so that people can remember the whole thing. But if not, then stick it to the conclusion, and people will tend to take that away from it. So it's great because
ChatGPT is very good for metaphors. ChatGPT is very good for metaphors. Give me 2 opposites on the topic of, and then you end up with, whatever you might have thought about. So that can help you.
Yeah, good. Yeah, ChatGPT could be used for illustrations. So it takes us to our conclusion. So there's 2 questions I want to ask you before we finish this podcast. The first one is self-reflective. Is what do you think you have to improve on as a public speaker?
I think it's an incredible journey. I think what I would like to continue improving on is using all the different tools that are available. So there is tools in the pure rhetoric, which are very interesting. I think for me, the one I would like to use more is the tool around using the space and gestures. So moving, for instance, I've been learning, and it really has been sticking with me, is how do you move on stage to do past, present, future? and you start moving 2 steps on your right, which is the left of the audience, which is usually how you do chronological order in Europe. It's not in all culture, but at least in Europe. And then move 2 steps in the middle and 2 steps on your left, the right of the audience, and then you show your journey. So this is something that I've been practicing a lot, and it works wonders, even if it's 3 steps in your presentation. There is way more of those tips around how you can use your gesture, your movement to actually support your language. So this is something that I would like to learn and practice more. But it's a matter of learning one at a time and then implementing it so it becomes something that comes naturally.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being honest with us. And the second thing is, if anybody was lucky enough to come to one of your presentations, what do you think they should try and imitate? What should they be looking out for to try and emulate themselves in their own presentations?
Interesting. I think structure is something that I've been really improving over time. So having an opening that is really capturing the audience, giving a hint on what I'm going to talk about and what are going to be the key points. Then at the end of paragraph 1 or chapter 1, during the wrap up, at the end of 2, during wrap up, we said 1, we said 2, now we're going to open 3. At the end of 3, said 1, 2, 3, and conclusion leading back to what was the opening. So really there is this capturing of the whole essence. I think structure is really helping people remember, follow and remember. So that's something that is really worth investing time once before you start writing the content, is really thinking about how you're going to orchestrate your talk.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, you've been talking a lot about this Rising Pineapples things. Do you want to talk about it for like 30 seconds and tell us all about it?
30 seconds. So Rising Pineapple is an initiative I did in 2019 because Berlin decided to have one extra bank holiday. And they decided to use International Women's Day as a bank holiday. And at that time, I wanted to be more involved in female empowerment. And I thought this is the perfect opportunity to get women in a room so they can take time for themselves. So we structured the day with connection, inspiration, and equip, so workshops. So the part on inspiration is TED Talk-like formats. And if you go on your YouTube channel, Rising Pineapple, you will see 2 of my talks, but you would see many others which are extremely inspirational. So I invite you to go to that channel.
Excellent. Brilliant. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Delphine, for accepting our invitation. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and learning a little bit more about you. Thank you very much, everybody else, for listening. If you have enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe. Feel free to reach out to us on our various social media platforms, which you can find on tailoredguidance.com. And all the other information is in the description. Thank you very much, and hopefully see you soon.